So I'm tri-racial, right? I'm ethnically, I feel I'm South Asian, and I spent the first 45 years living in Pakistan. And Pakistani society is very conservative, and the problems that come with being an outsider, visibly an outsider. It didn't matter what I felt inside, but I was an outcast. I'm also gay, which is another no-no, and I'm also Christian. So minority living in a Muslim majority country. And while I may have been a city person and been able to avoid much of what happens to villagers, it still is not easy listening to something happening. My life consisted, 45 years consisted of all forms of abuse, from childhood sexual abuse to physical, mental, emotional, and if there's such a thing as denying a child their allowance or something, then financial abuse also. Having said that, I lived there for 45 years. I loved the place, but I also knew I was messed up. And when the opportunity came to Canada in 2000, I took it. The first 2 or 3 years in Canada were actually easy, right? I got a good job, everything seemed to be wonderful. And then my history of being sexually assaulted came up, and somebody sexually assaulted me, and that put me into rehab. So for 5 years, rehab was a sort of a limp, right? One day you're off the wagon, the next day you're on the wagon. And it was all about, in that thing about finding identity, right? Am I South Asian? Am I Canadian? Am I white? Am I brown? What am I? Right? And where do I fit? So it took until 2008, and the problem with all of that time was, when my mother found out I was gay, she started threatening me, saying she would throw me out. She would have thrown me out if people didn't talk. However, people talk, so she had to put up with me. And having said that, that threat remained in my head. And in 2008, I lost my job, and I lost my apartment, and I lost everything. And here we come to homelessness, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely off. You've lost your home, so you are living elsewhere. I was precariously housed, which meant I was living in somebody's basement, which had rampant mold, right? If you stood still long enough, it would sort of climb up you. And the guy would keep threatening me that he would throw me out. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, maybe the third day. It took 4 months of living in that condition for me to take things in my own hands and move into a boarding house. And it was like having a parent again, because there was somebody to look after you, somebody to make sure that the meal was on the table, that you didn't have to do these things that your mental health issues might force you to do, as in get out of bed and go and cook some food, or go and buy some groceries, or clean the kitchen, or all of those things which mental health issues preclude quite often. My mental health issues are 3 concurrent illnesses of clinical depression, of PTSD, OCD, and anything else that comes as baggage along with those 3. Having said that, 6 years of living in the boarding house gave me a foundation, a stability, a peace, because I had never finished an education. In 6 years in the boarding house, I had an education. I trained facilitator, peer counselor, that kind of thing. And it's only my own fear of what my PTSD might do with finding another job that leads me to not try, because I'm so afraid when I hated the job, as in call centers, it didn't matter. If you blew the job, you can't fire me, I quit. Well, when you really love it and you want it and you're afraid that you'll do the same thing again, so I don't chance it. Maybe that's my own, a bit of cowardice maybe. But having said that, 6 years in there gave me an education, it gave me stability, it gave me something I'd never had. Not with my parents alive, right? Not with being an adult, quote unquote, an adult all of those years prior to the actual homelessness. And having said that, I finally left the boarding house in 2015 and moved into independent housing, which is where I live now. Scary, because you're suddenly in this high rise with 1,000 other people who you don't know, and since it's a rental, it's not exactly, the kind of people that might necessarily be socially acceptable otherwise, if one wants to call it that way. However, I work now for the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, for the Dream Team, because I know that housing is, forget necessary, it's essential. If you don't have a home, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? You can't find a job, you can't get an education, you can't entertain, you can't cook for yourself, you can't have a shower, you can't have all the things that you cannot do, not the things that you can do, which empower you. So I work with everybody because I know from personal experience how absolutely desperate the need is. And it's so great to see all of you here and to know that all of you feel the same way in your hearts about this major issue that faces us. Thank you very much.